It's been a while since we've caught up, and for all you new visitors to this oversized abode, we've been on quite the journey so far, so I'll give it a bash now. We started off way back in the mid-30s with a mystery and a musical. We had killer curry in an Oxfam shop. We've been quizzed about the clergy, counted in old money, and witnessed some of the world's best pubs and punch-ups, and then got stuck in 1952 for what felt like more than a year. It's a huge and very interesting place indeed. I'm Kev Moore, and as your host today, you're more than welcome to the House of Hammer. Today's room is all about the ultimate mystery movie Mantrap, or Man in Hiding, Woman in Hiding, or The Human Trap. And when I say all, I mean all. But more about that later. For now though, I'll try my best to make sense of it for you. Released by exclusive on the 10th of March and Fox on the 2nd of October 1953, Mantrap sees lawyer Hugo Bishop getting involved with the case of Mervyn Spate, who's on the run to prove he's not someone that pushes women to their death at the bottom of a small hill. Mervyn is in fact just a canny sketch artist. It's only fair that as we never actually see him doing his job, Bishop certainly has his work cut out when he meets Spate's ex-wife, who suffers from telephobia and an abundance of men. It all ends up being a race to find the real killer when everyone, including the ship's cat, could have done it. So with the police closing in, it looks like Spate is doomed to a life behind bars. Spate's phone-fearing ex-wife, Thelma, is played by none other than Lois Maxwell. And as this is the last chance we'll get to point the spotlight at her, here's Ben to be equally illuminating.
I'm not ashamed to admit that before we began our Hammer Odyssey, if you'd said the name Lois Maxwell to me, I wouldn't have been able to put a name to the face. Had you followed up with, Miss Moneypenny from the Bond films, then I would have known who you meant, but I wouldn't have been able to tell you anything else about her. And there's quite a lot to tell, aside from her 14 outings in the James Bond films. She was born Lois Ruth Hooker on the 14th of February 1927 in Kitchener, Ontario, Canada. Her mother was a nurse, her father a teacher. She was raised in Toronto and began her acting career at 14 in the CBC radio plays. During World War II, aged just 16, she ran away from home and lied about her age in order to join the Canadian Women's Army Corps. And then she quickly became part of the Army show in Canada. Later, as part of the Canadian Auxiliary Service Entertainment Unit, she was posted to the United Kingdom, where she performed music and dance numbers to entertain the troops. Whilst in England, her true age was discovered, and so to avoid her being repatriated to Canada, she subsequently enrolled in RADA, the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, where she became friends with her future co-star, Roger Moore. Lady Mountbatten reputedly persuaded British authorities to let her stay in England as her ward. Maxwell began her film career in England in 1946 with A Matter of Life and Death. Afterwards she moved to Hollywood aged around 20 and won a Golden Globe Award for the most promising newcomer for her role in the Shirley Temple drama That Hagen Girl in 1947. It was around this time that she changed her surname from Hooker to Maxwell, and most of her work consisted of minor B-movies, including, of course, Lady in the Fog and the subject of this episode, Mantrap, both made after her return to Europe in 1950. She also made a name for herself in Italian movies without even being able to speak the language. In 1962, she was personally selected by writer Ian Fleming to play Moneypenny in the first Bond picture Dr. No. Fleming reported he had gazed into her eyes and pronounced her a tall, distinguished woman with the most kissable lips in the world. You, my dear, are exactly the woman I visualised. Other reports, however, suggest Maxwell lobbied for a role in the film. She'd married in 1957, and her husband, Peter Marriott, the European head of NBC International, had suffered a heart attack, and as such they needed the money. The role as M's secretary guaranteed just 2 days' work at a rate of £100 per day, and Maxwell supplied her own clothes for the filming. As the introduction of supplementary characters with sustaining roles, in addition to James Bond himself, was quickly established as part of the 007 formula, Maxwell would go on to play the role of Jane Moneypenny until 1985, her last outing being in the best James Bond film of them all, A View to a Kill. Lois and her husband Peter had 2 children before Peter's death in 1973. It was reported that he'd never fully recovered from his heart attack in the 1960s. Following his death, Maxwell subsequently returned to Canada. In addition to continuing her acting career, she wrote a weekly column for the Toronto Sun under the pseudonym Miss Moneypenny, up until 1994 when she returned to the UK once again to be near her daughter Melinda. As an aside, Melinda would make an appearance in a Bond movie herself, a fleeting appearance in 1979's Moonraker. Following surgery for bowel cancer in 2001, Maxwell moved to Perth, Western Australia, to live with her son and his family. She remained there, working on her autobiography, until her death, aged 80, in September 2007. Aside from her many film credits, Maxwell had a number of TV credits which include episodes of Douglas Fairbanks Jr. Presents, The Avengers, The Saint, Stingray, The Persuaders, and Alfred Hitchcock Presents. It's been great to be able to see her in a couple of these early Hammer films, and one of the best parts about producing this podcast is learning more about these actors' life and body of work. But it will, of course, be as Miss Moneypenny that she'll be best remembered by most.
Well, Lois, of course, as Miss Moneypenny, you never get into those kind of difficult situations. What's the most difficult one you've ever been in?
The most difficult one is that I always want to kiss the guy, and I never manage to.
But you're always on, as the part actually is, always on the outside looking in. Have you yourself ever wanted them to write in a bit more sort of dramatic action into Miss Moneypenny and perhaps suggested something?
Indeed, yes. Diamonds Are Forever. I heard that they hadn't even written Miss Moneypenny in the script. So I said, well, obviously they want to get rid of me. So I telephoned Harry Saltzman. I said, Harry, I have the most magnificent idea. I have my pilot's license now. And why don't you send Moneypenny to Las Vegas, and she will land in her little Cherokee. Of course, the audience will know who I am, but the villains don't. And that night in the casino, she'll be there all dressed up in a marvelous backless dress, and covering the freckles, there will be microdots. And Bond will see her and come over and peel off the microdots and put them on his mold.
That's great. I can't wait.
And meantime, the villains get a little suspicious of this strange woman who doesn't really speak to anyone, and they check up with London, and they find that it's Moneypenny. So the next morning, when she climbs into her trusty Cherokee and takes off into the clouds in the dawn of Las Vegas, boom! A terrible, terrible explosion.
But you've written yourself out of the script, out of the film.
But I'd much rather go up in a ball of flames than be superannuated.
Which is what's happening, oh God. What is this deep, dark secret, then, that Moneypenny's got with James Bond that we're always kind of having to make, and as an audience, having to make up our own minds about?
May I tell him, Guy?
Yes.
May I tell him?
Your version.
My version. When Moneypenny was a young secretary in the typing pool, and Bond was a tea boy as he was taking lessons in pistol shooting and one thing and another, they felt rather attracted to each other, and they went away for a sort of very long weekend. And they appreciated each other very much, and there was a great deal of affection. And Moneypenny knew that if she fell in love with Bond, really fell in love with him, that her heart would be broken forever. And he realized that if he fell in love with her, he'd have to marry her. So after that long weekend, they just never got together again. But they have deep affection and, as I say, appreciation for each other's talent.
You know, I can't help thinking that she might have been talking about Roger Moore in real life there, who described her as being perfectly cast and a great asset to the Bond movies. Quite a legacy in itself.
Lois Maxwell. Simply amazing. I grew up thinking she owned a very popular brand of coffee. My parents have a lot to answer for. I mentioned her character's telephobia earlier, and it's not something I've made up either. I know it sounds weird in this golden age of communication and borderline insanity in 1953, but there's a growing number of telephobiacs now, with 70% of millennials thrown into an absolute whirlwind of anxiety whenever their Nokia goes off. To talk more telephony, here's Smokey. Just Smokey. Not a thing like Blondie. He'll keep you hanging on the telephone.
Every now and again, here at the House of Hammer, we watch a film and struggle somewhat to come up with suitable segments to bring to your ears every fortnight. Now, that's not to say that pure gold like hand cranks, false beards, telephone boxes and darts aren't bona fide classics, and they definitely weren't just plucked out of the air in sheer desperation. Oh no. But, just occasionally, the source material can leave one, how shall I describe it, a little dry. Mantrap is not only similar in title to another film we have reviewed, but it's also a little comparable in themes to some fare that we have previously visited. For this episode, I decided, because of their frequent and mind-meltingly annoying presence in this film, I thought it would be interesting to look into the history of the rotary telephone. And do you know something? I was completely and utterly wrong. A subject so dry that paint watches it. I could regale you of the facts of the circular construction, the shaft that activates the mechanical switching system. I could send you to sleep with the facts behind the finger wheel, why it would be transparent or opaque, and if it would have the numbers inside the finger hole or outside it. You would slip into a blissful coma if I explained why the number 1 was set at a 2 o'clock position at an angle of 60 degrees, and also why the numbers went anti-clockwise around the dial. But I won't. A, because it's so soul-crushingly boring, and B, despite what others may say or think, I'm just not that cruel. There are some interesting aspects about the phone to be considered, though. These days in the 21st century, it's actually a shock now if anyone tells you they don't own a mobile or cellular phone. These objects really have transformed our lives. Whether it's for the better or not, I think that's down to personal opinion. Never before has the world and its contents been easier for the human race to have access to. Whether it's the score of your chosen football team, the weather, the closest place that does vegan food, or discovering your new favourite clip of kinky naughtiness, and, just maybe, helping you with research for a podcast segment. But then there's the myriad of downsides to this. Not least the zombies walking through crowded streets with their heads bowed, ploughing into you with all the obliviousness of a toddler that's just found its ability. Or the utter morons who spend their entire time at gigs with their phones held aloft, not actually experiencing the thing they're there to experience. And on the serious side, according to studies, 67% of smartphone users admitted to checking their phones for calls or messages when it hasn't rung or vibrated. Apparently this is a major sign of cell phone dependence and should serve as a warning because this can have a serious effect on your mental health. On a personal note, that sounds a little like scaremongering, but then I wasn't part of the study. The phone, whether we like it or not, has become an integral part of our lives, and it is here to stay, regardless of what you use it for. In the course of my research for this segment, I was reminded of the observation made by one of my absolute all-time heroes, Mr. Stephen Fry.
Of course, a telephone is a fantastically rude thing. I mean, it's like going, speak to me now, speak to me now, speak to me now. If you went into someone's office and banged on their desk and said, I will make a noise until you speak to me, it would be considered unbelievably rude.
Now, of course, whilst Mr. Fry is absolutely correct with this statement, it more references the dreaded landline than it does to the device in our pockets, with our incredibly speedy ways of muting, silencing, or even blocking calls all at our fingertips. However, if we were to collectively agree that the telephones on show in Mantrap are truly frustrating, brain-smashingly, annoyingly rude things, well, then Mantrap surely just may be the rudest film ever produced.
There's some food for thought. And as the undisputed most boring of the team, you've now got me thinking about rotary telephones and what models they used in the various boxes over the years. Anyway, back to the film in hand. To the uninitiated, we started this odyssey many moons ago as a quartet that became a trio when our good friend and co-founder Adam had to take a step back from the proceedings. What we didn't know, though, is that it was just a step back into the colouring-in room, where he keeps his secret gin stash. So obviously we're cock-a-hoop to have the master of the whodunit join us, for at least this one, just to help explain things. So, as an unexpected treat, here's all four of us trying desperately to wrap our heads around the mystery that is Mantrap.
All right, my friends, we are in 1953 and in the company once again of director Terence Fisher for Mantrap, aka Man in Hiding, aka the film of 1,000 perpetually ringing telephones. I think before we properly move into the film, and there is quite a bit to talk about, I think, with the plot or anything, I think something really important needs to be addressed with this film is that we return once again with our star Paul Henreid, and obviously we didn't really mention it before when we talked about him, but is he the best recliner on furniture ever in movies? he not only sits on a desk a way I've never seen anyone sit on a desk before, he also, when he gets invited to sit on a sofa with someone, he sits on the arm and puts his feet on the cushions. I think it's genius.
He's very casual.
He's the chiropractor's friend. That's what he is.
He really is. Okay, anyway, no, let's get serious.
He had a bad experience on a sofa once, that's all it is. He just can't get it.
He was bitten by one.
So, after coming off what I thought was a rather patchy affair of the gambler and the lady, who would like to go first? Is this a better return to Hammer's form, or are we still in a bit of a mire of mediocrity? Who would like to lead us off on that?
I think we're in similar territory to where we were in the last episode for perhaps slightly different reasons. This is a quite straightforward film that takes an age to get where it's going and then packs the majority of the plot into the last 10 minutes. I think that there's lots to enjoy about it. However, I've seen it twice and I'm still not entirely certain what's going on. May I need you to explain the ending to me a little bit? I'm not going to lie. So I can't. Yeah, I'm not going to declare immediately this is a masterpiece. In fact, far from it. But I didn't hate it. I will say that.
Yeah, I'm the same actually. I didn't hate it at all, but I was really surprised at how long it was. It got to several story beats in. I looked down, I was like, oh my God, it's only 15 minutes that passed. Surely there must be some reason why this film is 75 minutes. And spoiler, there is not. So, it spends 15 minutes setting up the story, which is actually pretty interesting. And then you have this 35-minute wasteland, I would say, until you get to the whole reason why the film exists. And the end is pretty good. The third act's pretty good. And the first act's pretty good. But the second act is the longest, and it's bloody boring.
I agree. What I think they focus on far too long is that the quote-unquote victim of the piece, of Lois Maxwell's character, is they kind of imbue her with a kind of weird PTSD. And so it's affected by not only the incessant phone ringing, but also a knock at the door or a note being passed to her. Everything scares the absolute crap out of this woman. And it begins to get very tedious very, very quickly. Because the very first scene you see her in, of her entering an office, she's petrified straight away and agitated and a little bit annoying for no real reason anyway.
Bad traffic.
Bad traffic, yeah. Oh, London was crazy. And, but it's just that's not a great way of introducing you to someone who technically you should have a bit of sympathy for, but it really doesn't come across that way at all, and I think that's a bad way to start a film.
Her character is all over the place, actually, because not only is she terrified of the phone to such an extent where she leaves it ringing for weeks.
Ever.
Oh, no. But then she's so mercurial that when Paul Henreid's character, Bishop, turns up at her flat, she actually lets him in and lets him sleep the night. She's only just met him. It just makes no sense. It's just completely against everything that her character is. It's an odd beat.
In her defence, though, if my phone rings or someone knocks on my door, I emit a Homer Simpson-like scream. So I can't really hold that against her.
I'm going to phone you right now.
It's the landline.
Not the landline.
That's the worst one.
It can only be a call centre.
So before we go any further, we should just give a little bit of the plot, I think, here. So as Ben said, it's a little bit convoluted, to say the least. So we have Thelma, who basically believes that her former partner that she was with committed a murder. He has now escaped from prison. Is he after revenge? Is he looking to prove his innocence? not 100% sure. We then get Paul Henry, who plays Hugo, who is basically wanting to, is employed by a mutual friend of Spate, who is the escaped convict, to prove his innocence, basically. Foregoing the fact that Hugo is in fact a lawyer, not a policeman or a private eye, so it's a bit of a weird setup to begin with. And then also, as Ben alluded to as well, is that we're never given concrete reasons why or what has happened, and also is the fact that why, to be perfectly honest, why we should even care. But that's just my personal opinion. But that's basically your vague plot, is you have a lawyer who is trying to prove the innocence of an escaped convict, basically. So does anyone have any thoughts about where this film goes from here?
I like the setup, actually. The first 5 minutes are a little bit like, what's going on? Because everyone's just very shocked at something they've read in the newspaper. And then you eventually find out it's because this man called Spate, who committed this awful crime against the lady, she's dead, he was arrested. Everyone's scared of him for some reason. His ex-wife, as you say, Thelma, played by Lois Maxwell. A couple of other people are like, oh my goodness me, he's coming out again. Paul Henry, as you say, just seems to be this satellite figure who's just, oh, would you mind looking into this case? No, I don't want to. Oh, please. Oh, okay then. And then his missus says to him, Kay Kendall, she says, you could ruin your whole career by doing this. You ruin our entire life or everything we have planned for our future. Yes, but I owe him a favour. And it's like, hang on a minute. You were so unsure a minute ago that you were like, no, I won't touch it. And he went, oh, go on. You went, okay. And now suddenly you're willing to put your life and your future and everything on the line. It's a bit cat-handed, I think, the first 5 minutes. But I quite like the central conceit, which is you have a criminal on the run, and he seems to have returned to take his revenge on someone. And you don't know who that is. You don't know whether it's going to be his ex-wife for having remarried, whether it's going to be her new husband, and is he something to do with maybe what happened? Everything's very murky. The problem is that when it sets it up like that, you're like, okay, this isn't a whodunit. This is a why is the criminal back to do it kind of thing. You're trying to work out why the criminal's come back, because he doesn't tell him at the beginning. So that's quite interesting. But then you have this utter barren 45 minutes where Paul Henry just wanders from room to room and tell me where you were. Did you know this woman? All this sort of thing. And while I do like Paul Henry, it's Casablanca's Paul Henry. It's Now Voyager's Paul Henry. It's Goodbye Mr. Chips' Paul Henry. He's a big name.
He was great in Stolen Face as well.
Oh, he's great in Stolen Face, yeah. I just don't think the material there's just not enough material there. It's obviously they said, there's a 30-minute story here, we need to pad it out. There's certain things that happen in this film, like later on there's this scene where a character walks into Lois Maxwell's apartment and it's all shadows and tension, and she pulls out a gun, and you see the shadow walk in, she fires, and the screen goes black, and you're like, my God, this has got to have some kind of meaning. Like, why is this scene here? But it wakes up, and it's Anthony Forward's character who says, you shot at me and nothing happened. And I'm like, no, that can't be right, because she blacked out, and so did we. So something's happened here that's really important, and I'm sure there's going to be a massive twist around it, and it's going to be really cool when it's revealed. And nope, it's just as he explained. She shot at him, he ducked and fell over, and absolutely pointless scene. It's just like that sums up this film for me. It's just pointless. The last 10 minutes is fine, and it kind of explains things, but it chucks in a culprit that, it's like, oh right, it was that person. It's just a bit, the material's just too thin, that's all. Sorry. Yeah. I'll stop ranting, go.
The problem is that any red herrings or side plots are too subtle. And it's exactly what you said, Adam. You dismiss them immediately because the writing is so poor with them that immediately it's revealed that, was I supposed to think that was something or not? I mean, the Anthony Forward character is a perfect example. He doesn't rock into the film until about 45 minutes in. And he's presented as a possible killer, the possible, killer. He's affectionate towards Thelma, and,
who isn't?
But exactly.
Well, yeah.
But what I think actually, I'll sort of U-turn on myself as it's a favourite of the day, and I would say that aspect of it is written quite well, in so much that we don't know how much he's in love with Thelma to the point of what he might do about it. But in the end, slight spoiler, it turns out that he's just a nice guy. You know, and I mean that in a literal sense as opposed to the sort of 2022 definition of a nice guy. And so his character is completely null and void. But the problem is, it's fine for that to be the case and us to find that out in the last 5 minutes. But it's very obvious very early on that he's like the subtlest of red herring. And there's a couple of others as well who you just think, well, I'm dismissing them immediately because they're clearly not a threat. And it's actually quite refreshing to have a film where there are so many nice male characters in it, because there are throughout. There are a lot of really
they're not bad,
nice.
Are they?
They're good guys, you know, which is really good. But to talk without spoiling it, when it's revealed who the culprit is, what? Why? You know, why, why did he do it? We'll never find out. We obviously can piece together bits of the plot and think, well, all right, okay, I can, there's a scene at a family picnic where, or a dinner table where more is kind of alluded to than is actually said. Plus, he's got a massive dog.
I thought you were going to say dong then. I actually don't know why my brain heard dong.
I've not seen the director's cut. But when it happens, at the end, and it's revealed, and then we have the final sort of climax. I just don't care, because this character's been in it for like 7 minutes of screen time the whole way through, and it's just I'm not interested in his relationship with Lois Maxwell or with her husband. It's just it just didn't get me at all. I honestly, on the first watch, didn't know who he was. I was admittedly only half watching it, but I had to, and when I watched it like intently today, I was like, oh, well, that's all right. I know who he is now, but I care just as little.
Same. I didn't know who he was in the first watch. I was like, oh, yeah, it's that guy, right? I'm sure he was in the film before this moment, but okay, I didn't know it was...
Yeah. It's just the same as everybody. Everybody seems to get minimal screen time. I mean, even down to Bill Travers, in one of his very first films, I think, but he kind of comes back because he feels like he needs to come back. There's no sort of story behind him at all. He goes off for a meeting.
Oh, Kev, I love it's the best excuse to not be in a film, though. He goes off to Bristol to talk about superchargers. Come on.
Well, we all know about superchargers from a couple of films back. Superchargers are the driving force between Lady in the Fog, I think, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So superchargers are a big thing in the 50s. But
apparently so.
Yeah. But it gets to the point where it's like, how many suspects can you possibly have? And it just gets really... I think this is why I became disengaged with it, like you, Ben, because it was just too much. I'm thinking...
Whilst none of them really being suspects, that's the thing as well,
that's
because
the problem,
writing's so... I wouldn't even say bad, just light.
Well, as Adam said, it's too thin.
Bizarrely, the person that I did suspect was Anthony Forward as Rex.
Me too.
Because of how he's introduced and how he seems to be insinuating his way into her life. And
it made more sense.
It did make more sense. And let's face it, I've seen Forward in so many films where he's a bit of a naughty one. So
how many have we seen so far?
Well, yeah,
like,
exactly. He's got form. Shall we say?
Very much so.
But to come back to what I said, they'd literally have to put a gun in his hand and have him stood in front of her before you actually begin to think he's a credible villain. And even then, I didn't buy it for a second.
I think the main reason you suspect Anthony Forward might be the villain of the piece is because it's Anthony Forward. And
that's what we're saying.
Yeah.
It's not because he's doing anything particularly weird. It's just, it's like they stick Anthony Forward and he pops up at 20 minutes and he pops back up at 30 minutes and you go, I must be Anthony Forward because it's Anthony Forward. He's the in all of these films. But that scene where he gets shot at is a perfect example of just terrible plotting. It's a great scene, but it should mean something. You waste all that tension and that sort of, there's something sinister happening. And there's a lovely moment at the end as well where he tries to, Spate, the killer, the escape killer, is befriended by Paul Henry's character and taken to a nightclub. And it's like, we don't know who this guy is, but you do. So dance around in the sort of twilight of this nightclub and see if you can spot him. And when Forward spots that Spate's there, he tries to make a run for it. He tries to get out of the club, and he's stopped by Bishop, who says, you can't leave. And he's like, I need to get a scoop. And he's like, you'll get your scoop, just sit down, sort of thing. And you think to yourself, well, it must be Forward then, because, before he's trying to escape, obviously. And it still turns out that it's not him, which I thought was quite a neat touch. But there's another bit I do like as well, and that's about halfway through the film, Bishop goes to visit a sort of down on her luck a female character. Yeah, Susan. Yeah. In the sort of like boarding house, and she gives a clue, and you think, oh, that was not very important. But it turns out later that that's crucial. And then right at the end, she appears in this club and says, oh, there's the guy I was telling you about. And suddenly you go, wow, that's good writing. Why couldn't the rest of the film been like that? Why couldn't the forward scene have meant something? Why couldn't have all these clues he's picked up led to like resolutions of side stories? They just don't do anything. It's like it's about 4 important minutes in this whole film. The rest of it is just bull. It's pretty and it's well acted and it's got a lovely score and it looks nice and it's a nice thing to have in the Hammer canon, but it's just so inconsequential.
It's interesting to pick up on what you were saying there, is that unusually for this type of film, as we said, it does have so many nice guys in it. It does have so many nice men. Unfortunately, they're all so kind of drippy and inconsequential that it doesn't mean anything to it. You know, when it comes to it, we have the fashionista, who seems like a very nice guy, very flamboyant and friendly, and so that's kind of cool. You meet Thelma's husband. Okay, he's a bit of a stiff, but he's all right underneath it all and all this. But at the end of it all of these side characters don't really matter. I mean, you've even got the lead detective that Paul Henry, you know, he's mates with. Do we class this? Does this go on the bingo card as incompetent police? Because Paul Henry does more of the better police work than he does. So I think we've got a bit of a contender there. But I wanted to see if you agreed with this. It would make not one jot of difference to the entire film's plot and storyline if they changed Paul Henry from a lawyer to a PI or a retired policeman, whatever. It would make not one iota of difference to the story. And it would, and to be perfectly honest, it would make more sense. Like, Preston and Cloudburst, you know, make him a retired soldier who just, someone needs help.
Make him Simon Cherry.
So, there you go. That would make so much more. Yeah, a police consultant. That would make so much more sense than what they do have.
Make them the A-team, all of them.
Exactly. Yes. If you have a problem and you need someone to help, call Paul Henry. Exactly. Right. So this is that problem. This is the fundamental issue with the entire film, is that so much of it doesn't matter. It's as you say, there are, what did you say, Adam? 4 minutes of stuff you need to know.
It's about 4 or 5 minutes that are important.
Yeah, right, all right, I'll give you 5. I'll give you 5.
No, I'm just saying, whatever I said, but yeah, the rest of it is just window dressing and...
It really is.
Let's make a film.
Yeah, and this is a fundamental issue with what should be a fairly straightforward, as you say, not who done it, but why done it. And unfortunately, it doesn't really go that way. Okay, so we've gone through enough of the issues that this film has. Before we get on to ratings and whatnot, Adam just touched on something that I did want to point out, because I do have a couple. But any positives that you want to say about this film, and any favourite lines, because I do have a couple too.
I've got a couple. I'll start with a couple of lines that amuse me, but probably for the wrong reason. Because I have to say, some of the dialogue was a bit dodgy and certainly rather misogynistic. If I can just find in my notes, I did enjoy, your superchargers are much more important than my nerves.
Yeah, that's a good one. One of my favourites is, was it, no, when I knew her, she was dead.
I've got women worry about lots of things that men wouldn't give a second thought to. I've got another one. If I were a policeman, I wouldn't be smoking.
Speaking of Smokey's fashionista, which is a very weird sort of look at how life is anyway, because you see a lot of London, you know, like you see St John's tube station, for instance. That's still the only place that's really standing, that and St Paul's. So you're seeing a lot of really interesting post-war London shots. But then you've got Andre, this fashionista, doing this, like, glitzy party, and you've got all this sort of weird sort of juxtaposition, haven't you? You've got this ridiculous...
The decadence against the decay.
Exactly, yeah. But Andre actually says, tomorrow it'll be so gay, so non-austerity. I thought, ooh, that really nails exactly where you are in time.
Yeah.
Very much so. Only a few years, really, post-war.
Yeah,
not too long away, you know, less than a decade, so... Yeah, no, that's a very good shout.
Yeah, I agree with the period detail. It's nice to see that era represented on a film that doesn't look crummy. So this film does look very handsome. So it's very well shot, and it's very well produced, and it's very well set. I do like that kind of upper middle class side of the 50s, seeing especially London, because it's always so plush, and the music is fantastic. I really like that. I really like the Kay Kendall character, who's Paul Henreid's fiancée. I'm just really sorry that the writer bottled out and didn't use her a bit more, because when you have characters like Joan from PC-49 films, it almost seems like she's going to get something to do, but in the end she just sits there waiting by the phone for most of the film, and then at the end she sort of stands in the nightclub and says, no, do this, no, do that, and that's kind of her arc. And that's Kay Kendall, man. Use her a bit. But I did think she was really appealing, and I was hoping to see more of her, so definitely she's a bright spot. I did like Paul Henreid. Like you say, though, he is a bit mystifying. I don't know why he's there. I don't know why they asked him to do this job. I think there's lots to like. It's a nice film to look at. It's not a nice film to think about in terms of plot, but yeah, it's all right. It's not bad, and I'm with Ben. I didn't hate it at all. I just think that it just needed a better script.
I think the other a positive I enjoyed the performances as well. I thought I thought it was all there was no, I couldn't pull a fault with any of the acting performances. Thought Lois Maxwell was really good. I concur. I think with how you said, Smokes, about the opening, and it kind of put her on the back foot. But that was the writing. It wasn't her. Yeah. She was doing what she was asked to do. No. Yep. But I will end this my particular sort of roundup of the good bits with another line I really enjoyed that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Really, was the scene that I think Adam talked about earlier, where Thelma shoots at Rex and then sort of collapses. And then he brings her a glass of something and wakes her up, and they have this conversation, and she's like, oh, I'm really sorry that I shot you, or whatever, and she says, and he comes back with, oh, it's okay, we all have our funny little habits.
Oh, yeah.
What?
Beautiful.
Yeah, what an idiosyncrasy that is.
Mine is shooting everyone who walks in the door.
I mean, I've got to agree with that. I mean, as you say, it does look very pretty. It's very nice to look at. I can't really grumble at any of the performances. I did like John Penrose, who plays the fashionista, because obviously we've just seen him recently in Kind Hearts and Coronets, so it was nice to see him again. But something that I really liked, is a little bit of an extension to what you said, Adam, is I thought the chemistry between Paul Henreid and Kay Kendall was electric. I thought it was excellent. And, there's just these little flirtations and touches, or they're dancing around their living room together, or their office. It depends which way you look at it.
Even though it could be a dad.
Well, yeah.
He was 44, she's 25.
Just stop going for the icky, you. So
that's what she said.
Well, but there's a I thought it was a really sweet scene, is that she's going through everything that she's learned and found out, and instead of just standing and talking to him, she just kind of casually sits on his lap, and they're so flirtatious and so loving towards each other that I thought it was incredibly sweet. And just he decides that he needs to send a message to Thelma, and obviously she's his partner, but she's also kind of his secretary by the looks of things as well. And she goes to, take the message. He says, no, I'll do that. And it was kind of like a really subtle way of saying, you don't need to work at this moment. I'm going to do, kind of thing. And I really dug that. I thought it was great.
I thought her physical acting made those scenes. I completely agree.
Yes.
And I think she deserves huge credit, because she made it feel like they were in love, because, like you say, things like the way she sat on his lap and she kissed him on the head as they were talking, and she played with his hair. It's all things that I don't think will have been in the script. I think she'll have made those scenes, so I completely agree.
Yeah, I thought she was wonderful, and obviously we saw her in Wings of Danger as well, and she was a bright spot in that, in an otherwise poor film.
Yep. So
it was nice to see her again, and then obviously it made it all the more heartbreaking to realise what a life she had, and it was an absolutely tragic. I'm not going to go into it here, but if you want to read up on it, you can. It's absolutely heartbreaking. So it was, it's such a great talent, and it was really sad to hear what happened to her. But as bright spots go, her and Paul Henreid's relationship is the bright spot for me in this film. I thought it was played with such a warmth that I really dug it. I thought it was great.
Well, there's a fantastic piece between them when Paul comes back from spending the night at Thelma's. And,
yes.
I
had a wonderful night sitting on the most gorgeous sofa. And she's like, yeah, I'm quite fine with that, and you can tell she's not bothered, because
A, it's Kay Kendall, so, it's not going to score any higher than this anyway. And B, they're obviously that in love and she trusts him implicitly. So there's no need for her to get worried about him spending the night at some other woman that she's never met, and be okay with that. And I do find it such a lovely piece, but I realised halfway through watching it this time that I would say about 95% of her acting is in that one set. And when you start looking at it, her costume changes, but she doesn't change her earrings.
Shocking. I'm not going to star off for that.
I know. Yeah, same here. It was pretty low to start off with.
I was scrabbling to work out what your point was there. But okay, fair enough.
And there it was.
Fair enough.
She is a great actor. She was called the natural successor to Carole Lombard by Stanley Donen, who said that she was, the greatest physical comedian on the screen. And as you say, tragically short life.
Yeah.
Very, very
it's very, very sad. Very sad. And she was only with us for 2 Hammer films as well, which is a damn shame. I read she was in quite a lot of Ealing movies, but
she was in Genevieve, which is her most famous film, I think. Probably, a British classic.
Yeah, but as I say, Wings of Danger and this one are the only 2 she graced us for Hammer. Same as High Hazel, 2 films and done for Hammer. So I think we should raise our glasses to Kay Kendall because
and
it was nice to have. Yeah, it was exactly. It was nice to have known her for a briefer time, but it was still nice. Okay then, right, let's get on to some ratings, shall we then? Kev, you're at the top of my screen. Would you give us your final thoughts and a rating for Mantrap, please, my friend?
Final thoughts. I've pretty much said all I needed to say. There's a couple of nice bits that I didn't mention. The tape loops, spate, risk. This is another time where Hammer have used tape loops, and it's only when I started digging into it that this is a very, very early experimental technology at the time. For these to sort of embrace this effect and start using it all the time, I mean, it was still 8 years before the Radiophonic Workshop at the BBC started using tapes. And then another further 12 before the Beatles embraced it. So, wow, well done. I also find it ironic that the Daily Mail in this looks more believable than the Daily Mail does today.
I did think that. I must admit, I was like, bloody hell, they're actually talking the truth.
Yeah.
There weren't any migrants to hate in those days.
Exactly. But I also learned that if you want to hide from the law, the best place to do it is hide in a completely glass phone box, because they apparently can't see through glass phone boxes.
Nope,
so for those winning points, I'll give it a solid 5 out of 5, I reckon.
5 out of 5?
Don't be 5 out of 10.
Yeah, a solid 5 out of 10.
We're going on the order of my screen, and I'm next. Yeah, I mean, I think from what I can tell from what we've talked about, I'm pretty much the same. It was just an uninspiring film. Thin is a great word for it. It doesn't do much. Bizarrely, I enjoyed it a lot more on my first watch than I did on my second. I think just because you pick it apart more. Again, I'm going back to Kay Kendall and Paul Henry's chemistry, I think is a wonderful part of the film, and probably the parts I enjoyed the most. Although I will give a little mention when the first time that Paul Henry meets Spate, that they have I thought which was a great scene in a bombed out building, him on one, on the lower floor and Spate up on the higher floor, and it was kind of noir espionage kind of thing going on, and I kind of liked that. That could have been a Cold War thing, passing messages between spies, and I thought that was kind of cool. But unfortunately, the problems are more. There's just more cons than there are pros, and so it's a little shame. So, but it's not a bad film. I didn't hate it. I'm not going to rush to watch it again. So I'm going to agree with Kevin. It's a 5 out of 10 for me, and it's fine, but nowhere near the best we've seen so far. Adam,
like I say, you walk along the film and you are taken with all the things you're seeing and the wonderful performances. Unfortunately, it seems like they switched writers halfway through, and he just went, well, we don't need to solve that. We don't need to solve that. We don't need to solve that. And let's give you the weakest finale ever. And as you say, the performances are really fun. I like the way it looks. Do you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of someone saying, let's go for a walk. I have to show you something. This is going to be amazing. It's going to blow your mind. And you go, okay, great. and you're walking along a path with them, and you stand in a dog poo. Okay, bear with me. And then they go, don't wipe it off, just come with me. And you go, okay. So you keep on going, and you pass fields of trees and flowers and lakes and mountains and stuff. And you go, great, wow. And you get to the end of this path, and they go, there you go. It's a piece of newspaper to wipe your foot on. And it's like, that was it. And we passed all these beautiful things on the way, but this was the result of the film. And it's just such a disappointment. You go on this lovely journey with all these beautiful things, but that was the point all the way through, that there was nothing at the end. It's just terrible.
And it was the Daily Mail.
It's just exactly. It's a really disappointing, way to spend money to make this film and to have produced this result. So, while I do like the people in it, and I do appreciate the talent on offer, I just think it wasn't worth it. So, I'm going to go for 4 out of 10, I'm afraid.
Okie dokie. Ben?
Didn't we go on that walk when we were at your house, Adam?
Yeah, we did. I noticed you wiped it all over my carpet.
Want to see a wooden shed that's falling apart, lads?
Yeah. At least I told you what was at the end.
If you will carpet your house with the Daily Mail. Anyway, I think in conclusion, I'm asking why we haven't got segments on tape loops and superchargers. But in relation to the plot, yeah, we're all in the same general zone. There's stuff to enjoy this, but it's quite disappointing. And it's a B movie, isn't it? I mean, it's a bang average B movie. It's 5 out of 10. I'm going to give it as well.
C movie.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to like it more. I was sympathetic towards it, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to, give it more than I think it's worth. So yeah, 5 out of 10. I'll not remember it. Mind you, what do I remember? But I'll not remember it in a few months' time. Other than a handful of key points. Yeah. So yeah, it was okay. I wouldn't dissuade anyone actively from watching it, but in the same way, I wouldn't fall over myself to say, "Oh, you must see Mantrap."
It's all right.
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right. Okay. Well, before we leave the round table, we decided we would have a little fun, but also because we've stumbled across this phenomena before where it comes to Hammer films, in that some of the titles are somewhat less than inspiring or have anything to do with the film at all. Granted, the actual name of the title of this film is said during the film.
It's leave it in, though, isn't it? It's leave it in.
Felt a little clunky. So I'm going to go around the room and see if anyone can come up with a better title for Mantrap. And you were just the last man talking. How about you, Daniel? What have you got? Alternative title? Let me say that again in English. What about you, Ben? Do you have an alternate title for Mantrap?
Well, I can add some context to this if you want me to, or not. I would call this film The Deadly Hole.
I'm sure I rented that in the 80s.
Because 2 people die and 1 person almost dies by simply falling into a hole. It's not like a mine shaft. It's like a hole. Like literally a hole you can just roll into. But apparently, Gordon Bennett, it
kills everyone.
It's the deadly hole.
Yep.
It's like Thunderdome. 2 people leave. 2 people go in. 1 person leaves.
But yes, but concave, Kev, as opposed to convex.
This is true. I mean, I had sort of an extension of my half joke at the beginning of the film. The incessant ringing of telephones is oh god. I had to mute on several occasions on my second viewing.
Because it's quite a long title, though, you're proposing.
There was a comma coming.
There's more.
But yeah, no, the incessant ringing was driving me nuts. But yeah, I think that is. It should be called The Ring-ing.
With a hyphen between the ings.
Yeah. Paul Henry'd coming out of a telly like that.
Reaching for a cigarette.
That's the one. Kev, do we have any alternate titles, my friend?
I was thinking man-bait, but I'm sure that's been used for something else.
Only by the Americans.
Yeah. But no, the Americans called it man in hiding, so I'm going to just call it plot in hiding.
Oh, nice. I like it.
Sick burn.
That is good. Adam, do you have any?
Well, as this film is all about a man called Spate being pursued, I thought just call it Master Spate. Because that's the name of the man they're after. Or, get this, Spate Watchers. A red day or a green day. Or it's great when you're spate. Yeah, there you go.
But it's not.
But it is though.
Great, though.
He gets away in the... Oh, no! No spoilers. Yeah, but,
Well, if he's sort of dodging the law, so he could be swerving Mervyn.
Ooh!
But I think my final one would be, and this is a very personal title to me, but who's he and what's happening?
There you have it. If you're looking for a decidedly average film, but a weirdly well-made one, then Mantrap's a solid recommendation from us. The biggest mystery has to be, what happened to it? Was it down to the writing? After all, you have Terence Fisher getting in on it, the Daily Mail film critic Paul Tabori adapted it from a book, and the book itself was written by the mystery writer Elliston Trevor, Adam Hall, Simon Rattray, Mansell Black, Trevor Burgess, Roger Fitzallen, Howard North, Warwick Scott, Caesar Smith, and Leslie Stone. No wonder it was a bit of a tangle. I'm kidding about the book writers. They're all the same man. Trevor Dudley Smith was born in Kent in 1920, and after serving as a flight engineer during World War II, he took up writing full-time in Spain and France before moving to Phoenix, Arizona. In 1946, he used the pseudonym Elliston Trevor for his mysteries. He liked it so much more than Trevor Dudley Smith, he made it his legal name. And like many other writers, he's used the pseudonyms for anything else. He wrote thrillers, plays, juvenile novels and short stories. His best-known works were The Flight of the Phoenix, written as Elliston Trevor, and using the same model as his successful series of Hugo Bishop books, he wrote the series about the British secret agent Quiller as Adam Hall, which won him quite a few notable awards. And in fact, the Quiller Memorandum was also made into a film in 1967. If it's not the writing or the filming, maybe it's the cast that lets Mantrap down. We mentioned a few of the established and future stars in the film, but the future Hammer Glamour goddess herself, Barbara Shelley, also makes her film debut in this. Any casting director would give the right arm for any of the names on here. So maybe, just maybe, this is the real mystery of Mantrap. If you think you have the solution to the problem, you could always contact us on the social media handle @HouseHammerPod or email us at scream@houseofhammerpodcast.com. Don't bother ringing us though. Smokey burnt the telephone in some weird midnight ritual that involved all kinds of rudeness and a complete lack of table manners. If you've enjoyed what you've heard, there's a variety of ways you could help us keep the lights on. You could always sign up to our Patreon, where there's a wealth of bonus entertainment at your fingertips, be the coolest muddy funkster in the neighbourhood with our spectacular merch, or simply take a couple of minutes to share the love on Apple Podcasts. As always, all the links are in the show notes. All that's left to say is our goodbyes.
From me, Adam Roach.
From me, Ben Tillison.
From me, Smokey.
And me, Awesome Kev Mawsome. Nobody calls me that yet, but here's to it catching on.